Captain America Brave New World was released in 2025 and was directed by Julius Onah. It tells the story of Sam as the new Captain America who has found himself in the middle of an international incident after meeting with the President Ross. Sam will have to discover the reason behind a global plot before the true mastermind has the entire world seeing the colour of red. The trailers for Captain America Brave New World, for me, weren't really all that interesting and they didn't really grab me. I think it would have made much more sense to release this movie around 2021 or 2022. To me, it would just make sense to release the next Captain America movie about 2 to 3 years after Avengers Endgame. I mean, 6 years since Endgame? I don't know, it just feels kinda late. I know we had the TV show The Falcon and the Winter Soldier in 2021, but that's the TV show, this is the movie. But while the trailers weren't really grabbing me, I did see some potential with the movie. I do think the storyline could have been interesting, and I would have liked to have seen how the movie was executed. And the movie has now been released, and unfortunately, Captain America Brave New World, sadly, is quite a disappointment. It's not a bad movie by any means, but it's definitely one of the weaker MCU movies, and not a very good one. The biggest problem with this movie for me is the story. The storyline is so dull. The beginning of it is somewhat interesting, and there is some good action here and there, but the beginning of it to me just made it feel a little out of place with the MCU. I don't know what it was, but there was just something about the beginning especially that just made it feel disconnected to the MCU. It didn't really feel like I was watching an MCU Captain America movie. The first act was just very bland. There was some decent action here and there, and 1 or 2 character interactions that were good, with some funny lines of dialogue. But then the second act came, and the second act was so fillery. Absolutely nothing happened throughout most of the middle act. The middle act was so dull, and I honestly lost interest in the film very quickly. The second act was just, nothing was happening. It was so much filler and it just added to nothing. And then the third act was fine, there was some good action scenes, there was a really good climax, but the ending of the movie was just kind of There is some good action scenes and there is some good character moments. My biggest problem with the good moments in the film is that they feel like they belong in the completely wrong film. There is potential with this story. I can see this story being really good. Unfortunately, it's the execution that lets it down. The execution of the movie is just so underdeveloped and uncooked, where it made everything feel very underdone, as in it needed more time to cook. The direction and the storytelling is just not very good. It's very lackluster. Visually, the movie does look pretty good. The outfits look awesome. There's some beautiful colours on the outfits. The outfits are just so cool. There is some really good action scenes. The cinematography of the film is pretty good. And there is some very nice shots to look at. And the locations in the movie look very nice too. The cast are doing a good job. Anthony Mackie does a fantastic job as Sam. Harrison Ford did a good enough job, but I honestly thought some of his line deliveries were quite poor. And this might be just me, but I felt in some scenes it was a bit hard to understand what he was saying. But to give credit, the cast definitely do try to give a good job. They're definitely trying their best and they do deliver some good performances. And then the film's characters are not that great either. Sam in this film was okay, but his character felt a bit lackluster and I didn't really feel like he developed much throughout the movie. And I honestly didn't really believe he did anything to make him worth carrying on the legacy of Steve Rogers. There was Woken, who's Sam's friend in this movie, and he's alright. I didn't feel like they did a lot with his character, and I honestly found his dynamic with Sam to be a bit undercooked. They had some decent interactions here and there, but there was very little of them, and I feel like they should have had more to help flesh out their dynamic. Isaiah was good enough, but he didn't really do anything apart from the beginning, and I honestly feel like if he was more involved, I actually think he could have been a really good character. There's Sabra, who works with the president, and she's very forgettable for me. I didn't care for her at all. I just felt she was very, very bland and incredibly dull in the movie. President Ross, though, well, I'll give him that he had potential to be interesting, but for me, he feels very underdeveloped and just feels like he wasted a lot of potential. I'll give credit and admit there is scenes with him where I feel the movie is trying its best to develop him as a character, but as a character, I just feel he fails to be interesting. There's another villain, I'm not going to spoil who he is because he hasn't been in any of the marketing that I've seen, but he's in the post-credit scene. I'm not going to say who it is just to avoid spoiling, but for me, he was terrible in this movie. Now yes, he was in the post-credit scene, so that does mean maybe in future installments he could become a more interesting character. But in Captain America Brave New World, this character for me sucked. There was just absolutely nothing to him. So the film's characters are quite disappointing in my book. The music of the movie is quite forgettable. There is a few decent pieces of music here and there, but for the most part, the music's not really that memorable. I think it's a massive shame with how this film turned out, because I can definitely see potential in this being a really good movie. But sadly, it just ain't. Overall, Captain America Brave New World is sadly a disappointment. The storyline is very dull, the characters not all that great, and the music for the most part is quite forgettable. There is some good action with some good cinematography, and there is some decent moments sprinkled in here and there, but sadly the overall movie is just quite disappointing. I'm going to give Captain America Brave New World a 6 out of 10. So the MCU is not off to a great start this year, I feel, but hopefully the next two movies are better. Hopefully they're big improvements over this one. There is some decent things about it, but the overall movie for me is quite underwhelming. Now on to my thoughts on Dogman. Dogman was released in 2025 and was directed by Peter Hastings. It tells the story of a police officer and a dog who unfortunately encounter an accident which leads to the dog's head being sewed onto the man's body, which creates Dogman, who becomes a very powerful cop dog, but then there's an evil cat called Petey who wants to commit multiple crimes in the city, and it's up to Dogman to stop him. The trailers for Dogman were entertaining to say the least. They made it look like a fun enough movie. It didn't look anything amazing, but it looked decent, charming fun. And I did rewatch Captain Underpants recently, and I think it's good. I think it's a good kids movie, I would say. I'm not saying it's strictly for kids. I just think kids would get more enjoyment out of it. And I feel the same applies to Dogman. Dogman, though, I definitely believe is a step down from Captain Underpants. And to be honest, I didn't really think it was all that good either. Dogman's storyline and direction was just so basic, so simplistic. There wasn't really anything about the plot that felt very clever or even thought-provoking. There was just a lot of parts in the movie that were just not very interesting, and I honestly struggled to get invested in the plot. The film's humour, while granted some of the jokes were actually really funny, there were definitely some jokes that really did fall flat. It's just not a very interesting storyline. It's just not a very interesting movie. But to give credit, there is some entertainment value in it, there is some fun action, and there is one or two decent character moments sprinkled throughout. But the overall story and direction just doesn't offer anything new, and it just feels very simple. It honestly just feels as simplistic as a piece of paper, to be honest. The animation of the movie was very nice, actually. The frame rate was very interesting. It was definitely a lot more choppier than, say, Captain Underpants. Though this is a very minor thing that bothered me. In the beginning especially, there were these moments that had awkward pauses between the dialogue, and the pause was around that length that just made it very awkward for me. So there were some gaps and pauses in the movie that just made it a little bit odd and a little bit awkward to watch. But the animation is very creative and the character designs are actually pretty good too. Especially for Dogman and Petey. I actually really like their character designs. I like that they're very unique from one another. And they do remain faithful to the original book series, which I've never read, so I can't compare this to the book series. The film's characters are they're fine. Dogman was an okay character. He has his charm at times and he is quite funny in areas, but there wasn't really anything about him that I found interesting. The police chief is the same. He has some funny moments with Dogman, but as a character, I just felt he was okay. Him and Dogman, though, do have some nice moments together, even though a lot of it was really given away in the trailers. Petey, though, is interesting to say the least. I'll be honest, I found him very annoying at first, but then later on he was just I didn't really feel the decisions he made later on worked for his character, and I honestly found him to be quite stupid at points. There is a scene with him and Lil Petey towards the end of the movie that has a little bit of heart to it, but that's about it. As for Little Petey though, he's actually honestly hilarious and he made me laugh my ass off in this movie. He is easily, definitely the best character in the film. And then every other character is just not really all that memorable, not really all that interesting, and some characters just feel like they just don't really need to be here. The music of the movie? It's actually pretty good, I'm not gonna lie. The music is actually quite catchy at points. Like with Captain America Brave New World, there is some enjoyment in this movie, but I feel it's just the overall film itself that just feels very bland and very, very simplistic. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it was just alright for me. Overall, Dogman is passable. The storyline doesn't really offer anything, and the characters aren't all that interesting either. But the animation is nice, the music is decent, and there is some funny humour here and there. There's some entertainment in it, but it just doesn't really do anything all that thought-provoking. I'm gonna give Dogman a 6 out of 10. So definitely not one of DreamWorks' best, but not one of their worst either. I'm gonna be honest, but the best part of going to the cinema today was when they showed the trailer for The Bad Guys 2 before Dogman. And unfortunately, they didn't even play The Bad Guys Little Lies and Alibi short film before the movie. Apparently a few cinemas haven't been doing that, and I honestly find that really, really weird, especially with what they promised. But I can't deny, when the trailer for The Bad Guys 2 played, I got the massive smile on my face. Hype, man. I cannot wait for that movie. August can't come soon enough. I'm so excited. So that's it for my double review of Captain America Brave New World and Dogman. Let me know what you guys think of both movies in the comments section below. Thank you all so much for watching. Take care, guys. See you all in the next video. Until then, stay tuned. And until then, guys, take care, everyone, and skidoosh.